Well, ladies and gentlemen, so yesterday we had a little bit of a groundbreaking news. The CAF, Confederation of African Football Appeal Board, decided to strip Senegal of their 2025 AFCON title. And the reason they did so was in respect of Article 82 and Article 84 of the regulations of the CAF Africa Cup of Nations. Now, it turns out, and some people didn't know this, despite many people talking about this on the day of the final and and the aftermaths, AFCON has a big book of rules. Yeah, believe it or not. Yeah, it turns out that competitions do have rules. It's almost 52 pages. Lots and lots of technical details about advertisements, what you're supposed to wear, what kind of things it's a huge. But the primary articles that were used by this appeal board to actually strip and make the case and reach this decision, Article 82 and Article 84. Let's read what these articles state. Okay? Article 82, which falls under Chapter 35, which talks about withdrawals, says if, for any reason whatsoever, a team withdraws from the competition or does not report for a match or statement, refuses to play, or statement, leaves the ground before the regular end of the match without the authorization of the referee, it shall be considered loser and shall be eliminated for good from the current competition. The same shall apply for the teams previously disqualified by the decision of CAF. Article 84 says the team which contravenes the provisions of Articles 82 and 83 shall be eliminated for good from the competition. This team will lose its match by 3-0 unless the opponent has scored a more advantageous result at the time when the match was interrupted. In this case, this score will be maintained. The organizing committee may adopt further measures. Now let's just kind of go back to Article 82. There's a few things. There's a lot of people yesterday who just kept talking. Few things. People in the comments, there's few things. First and foremost, there's a lot of talking heads in the news saying that it has to be a certain amount of time. And now, this is the article, okay? This is the article. There is no mention of any time. There's no minimum amount of time, maximum amount of time. There's none of that, okay? And it also is important to note that leaving the ground is not a necessary condition for Article 82 to actually hold. Because in fact, refusal to play alone is sufficient for you to be considered a loser. Because as you can see here, when it says or refusal to play, it doesn't say and leaves the ground. It says or leaves the ground. So meaning, even in the instance where you decide to stay on the pitch as a team, in the case of Senegal, for example, let's say you stay on the pitch, you don't leave, but you are refusing to play, which you've done. Senegal has done both. They have refused to play, but they also left the pitch. Now, some people say not all the team left the pitch. Open for interpretation. You can make the case that what is considered as the whole team leaves the pitch. Is it the whole team? Is it just the players? Is it the players, the substitutes, the technical staff, the medicals? Like what is considered as a team? And it's possible that in this document there's a very specific definition of what team means. But even in the situation where Senegalese players were still on the pitch but were refusing to play, they shall be considered as losers. And that's what this article states. And, whoever wrote this article, I think they cornered themselves because this article, the way it's written, it's kind of fairly straightforward to interpret. It's fairly, you don't have to, not even to interpret, to read. You have if you have the most, the strictest of readings of these kind of articles, and if you don't even think too much, it's fairly clear what should be done. Or rather, it's fairly clear what happens. And one additional thing I need to add here is that there is no mention whatsoever in this article of referee, decision, or agency, or judgment And there is no decision, or no mention rather, of a match official or a CAF representative. What this article basically says is if this condition, or if any of these conditions is met, it doesn't. They don't have to be all of four of them. Shouldn't, like, they don't have to all be met at the same time. Only one is sufficient. If one of them is met, the consequence is automatic loss. Sorry, automatic loss. There is no. It's not. It's not up to the referee to make that call. It's not up to the CAF representatives to make that call. It's not up to some other match officials. It's by virtue of this article, by its very existence. If this condition is true, then the second one, if A is true, then B must be true. If you refuse to play, then you are considered to have been lost. You are considered a loser. If you leave the ground without authorization of the referee, you are considered to have been a loser. If you refuse to play without the authorization of the referee, you shall be considered a loser. And both these conditions were true that night. Both conditions were true. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe leaving the ground was not true. Maybe leaving the ground is you can argue. Okay, we can argue there. Okay, there's some nonsense. There's some nonsense that some journalists are like. Look at this guy. Look at what the nonsense that this guy is saying. Listen to what this guy is saying.
Team leaves the grounds, then they forfeit the game. But Senegal never left the ground. Senegal were on the ground, because you can say there's a difference between on the pitch or the field of play and the grounds.
But he like, you can, the way he's like, he's not convinced about. He knows that you need to have some do some crazy mental gymnastics to be convinced with what you're saying. Okay. Oh, they were on the ground. The ground includes the whole stadium and the parking around the stadium. That's all part of the ground. It's not just the pitch, the green part where we play. There. If you can go to the your changing rooms, that's still not considered the ground. Okay. That's still that's still considered the ground, and so you didn't really leave. I mean, that is a very, very, very stretched interpretation, okay? And trust me, I don't think anybody, like, any reasonable person will not interpret this that way. Okay? It's fairly clear for any logical person, we know what the ground means. Okay? Like, we're not we're not again, even if we go by that interpretation, like, and again, I'm being serious here. Even if let's assume we believe that interpretation, okay, you still have this condition here: refusal to play. That is again still sufficient for Article 82 to hold, and therefore for the team to be disqualified. Now, the big problem, of course, is this did not happen on the night. This is the issue. This is the big issue. That this did not happen on the night. And there's a lot of talk about it right after the end. Like, there's all kinds of, anybody who actually, like, bothered to take some time to research the rules. And this circulated literally, I think, in in the second, like, after they started playing additional time, there was already circulating on Twitter information that this article exists, because, of course, like many people, I didn't know this existed at that time. And so the controversy began even as the match was proceeding, or after kind of the players came back, and that, wait a second, that there is a breach here of the rules of the competition. Why didn't the referee stop the match and say, well, listen, you're considered losers? Or why did whoever is responsible for the organization say, oh, Article 82 has been met, you're out of the competition? Okay. So, you can blame the referee, you can blame, I mean, again, nobody here is defending the CAF. Okay, everybody knows the Confederation of African Football is a corrupt, incompetent organization. Like, and we've got many, many problems. So you cannot find any single confederation or federation, football federation in Africa that will come to the defense of the CAF. Every federation in African football can find some way or another that they'll point to an injustice that the CAF had on them. They'll even Egypt, who with their 7 series of wins, it doesn't matter. Like any federation will always find problems and issues with the CAF. And so it's no not not some sort of like insight that the Confederation of African Football has issues of governance, issues of corruption, issues of politicization, and whatnot. Um, but what this appeal board has done is unprecedented, and that is true. And many people seem to think that the CAS, the Court of Arbitration of Sport, is somehow is gonna reverse the decision of the appeal board. But let me tell you why I don't think that's the case. Um, what's probably going to happen is Senegal is very likely going to go to the Court of Arbitration of Sport with their case, saying, "Oh, this is unfair," and the match ended on with us winning, and blah blah blah. But the CAS, um, in my opinion, will uphold this decision for 2 primary reasons. Number one, the Court of Arbitration of Sports is very, very, very rarely willing to reverse the decision of a sporting organizing committee. They very rarely do it. So, just statistically speaking, the chances of them reversing this ruling are really small, because just in general they don't do it, because again, their business is not to tell federations what they're supposed to do or tell sporting organizations what they're supposed to do. It's just to make sure that the rules have been followed. And in general, when federations and organization committees and all, when they come with a decision, they don't just make them in vacuum. Okay, these organizations, sporting organizations, believe it or not, despite their corruption and incompetence and all that, they will try in general to find a some sort of legal basis upon which they'll make a decision. It can be like again, an article, a small article like this in some book of rules that nobody has bothered to read, but they will try to base them on some sort of like reasonable grounds. And so that already makes it difficult for the CAS to, in general, reverse rulings that sporting organizations make. Number two is the Court of Arbitration of Sports. There's this misconception that it somehow cares about the result or the outcome of what happened on the field. Because Senegal has won on the field and they went on to extra time and they managed to score against Morocco and they won, that should be what, that should hold, that's what matters. No, from the perspective of the Court of Arbitration of Sport, that what happens on the field is not actually, it's in general not taken as much into account as one might think. It's clearly important, of course, but what they actually care about is upholding the rules of the game. And by the way, a very famous case just recently was in front of the Court of Arbitration of Sport. After the Olympics of 2024, there was an athlete that competed in a weight category, but they had exceeded the weight category limit by 100 grams, I think around 100 grams, so a little bit less than 100 grams. So they, on the day of weighings, they had 100 grams more than what the limit of their weight category was. It somehow, they were allowed to go on and fight a match. And I think it was a bronze medal that they were fighting in that match. They won the bronze medal. I think a week or two went on. The IOC, International Olympic Committee, decided to strip them of that bronze medal. They said, you actually were over the limit by 100 grams. You shouldn't have been allowed to compete. You're out, it's the breach of the rule. And therefore we're stripping you off the medal. The athlete, their federation, and their lawyers went and said, no, that shouldn't be the case. We won. It was on you to decide. It was on you. It was a fault of yours that you didn't implement the rules on the day of the match. This is ours. We won fair and share. And everybody, think about it. Do you think 100 grams makes a difference? In that, like, do you really think that 100 grams was the difference? Of course, that person who managed to win the bronze won it on the field. Clearly they were better than the other person or scored more points or whatever. So they went to the CAS. They went to the Court of Arbitration of Sports. The Court of Arbitration of Sports upheld what the IOC decided. They don't care. Again, the CAS does not care about the results of the match. They don't care that that athlete managed to win a bronze. One could say fair and square. They were the better athlete and they managed to beat the other person, and 100 grams shouldn't make a difference. But the Court of Arbitration of Sport said that doesn't matter. Like, what happens on the field in general, from the perspective of the Court of Arbitration of Sport, is not as important as whether rules have been followed or not. Because what the CAS is mostly interested in is to ensure fairness and integrity of the different sports it basically has influence over and can rule on. And therefore, in general, it does not actually care so much about what happens on the field. What they care about, has the rule been followed? And in general, their interpretations of the rules are quite strict. And again, they do it because it's not them who wrote the rules. They don't write the rules. And they do not want to be in a position when they have to interpret rules. If there's problems with how the rules are written, and this clearly, there's a problem with how this rule is written. It's too generic. It's too, it's too generic. Yeah, maybe there needs to be a clear decision maker here. Okay, one of the things that's missing from this rule is who makes the decision. It just says it shall be considered loser, but who, this is a statement of fact. But then somebody somewhere has to actually make that call. Okay, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's just like there's not some sort of coordinated software system or AI that is currently watching the match and says, oh, you know what, this rule has been met. Okay, you're now loser. No, there's no such thing. A human needs to make this decision. Should that human be the referee? Should it be the some sort of representative of the CAF? Should it be a committee? I don't know, but that's not clear from this rule, from this article, and that's missing. But it's not up to the Court of Arbitration of Sports to interpret this. That's not what they do. They will read it quite strictly, and if there needs to be changes to this rule or this article, it's up to the federation to do that change in the future. So, for these two reasons, I think they won't do it. I think they will not reverse the case. Again, number one, in general, the CAS rarely reverses decisions of the organization committees. The IOC, FIFA, CAF, AFCON, Common Ball, very rarely do it. And number two, they don't care about on-field performance. What they care about is whether the rules were followed or not. Okay. And number three, they're not in the business of interpreting things. They tend to interpret in the strictest ways. In fact, I'll go beyond and say that there's a very high chance that when Senegal goes to the CAS, that the CAS might even dismiss their whole case. Because the CAS, the Court of Arbitration of Sports, has three options. They can fully uphold the decision. They can partially uphold the decision. They can, four options. They can reverse the decision in full, reverse it partially, or dismiss it. Okay, so they have actually five options. So they can't actually say, oh, we're partially upholding this, meaning that, yeah, the title is still stripped, but there's these other things. And again, the actual appeal includes other things, which we haven't talked about because the stripping of the title is the biggest and most important one. But they can uphold the decision, say, well, there's certain things that need to be reviewed. They can, which I think is extremely unlikely, say they reverse the decision. Okay, they can reverse the decision, but again, I don't think it's gonna happen. Or they can actually dismiss the whole case. They say, well, your appeal to the CAS is dismissed, and they do this a lot. In fact, I was saying earlier that they tend not to reverse decisions of organizing committees, but in general, they tend to dismiss the cases. If you look at the majority of cases that go to the Court of Arbitration of Sports, or the appeals that go to the Court of Arbitration of Sports, they tend to be dismissed because the Court of Arbitration of Sports doesn't see any issues. This is, oh, well, it's not up to us to judge here, okay? And it's very likely that they'll do the same here. They'll say, oh, look, you have an appeal board. The appeal board followed the rules of the competition, and that's it. We don't have to jump in. There is no scope or space for us to come in and kind of change any decision or make any call. You know what I mean? So it's yeah, this is how the CAS operates. I've heard all kinds of things about, like, oh, what kind of light this kind of throw on, or like kind of paint. How do we paint African football? I mean, African football is what it is. Okay, it has its problems. Some in Europe, in particular, the European journalists who are like, oh, I see, we've been telling you African football is bad, and this is why we have issues with African competitions, and they take our players and blah blah blah. Listen, what kind of legitimacy is African football getting when it acts like this? And yeah, it's certainly problematic in how it what's that. But one thing that these journalists need to realize is there's nobody seeking legitimacy from them. Okay, they are increasingly irrelevant. I think there is this false sense of importance. It almost seems to me like the Europeans in general, across different fields, be it politics, they seem to think that they have a kind of a weight in the world that they no longer have. Clearly, in soccer, that's where the big players are and the big teams and all of that. But I think their influence is not as big as it used to be, and their opinions are not as important as they used to be. People will watch AFCON, irrespective of how these European newspapers paint it, irrespective of what they say about it, irrespective of what they think about it. The Africans in Africa will watch AFCON in the next edition and the one that comes after it, and they might change the cadence from 2 years to 4 years. The Africans will watch AFCON no matter what, no matter how much they hate what's happening right now or what has happened before. What happens every edition, every edition, there is some team, some country that has like grudges. But every year, the audiences increase, the people are watching, the people are continuing to watch, and the African diaspora around the world, in Europe, in North America, in Asia, in South America, in Australia, and New Zealand, they will watch the AFCON. They listen. They will watch it. They can hate and claim. The numbers are as clear as it gets. The numbers show what the people will do, not what they will say they will do, and certainly not what you think. Not what a bunch of irrelevant sports journalists in Europe think that they should do, or that they should behave. Now, in addition to all of these large and increasing audiences, the fact that the African teams now have players that are increasingly world class, increasingly marketable, makes it natural that the competition will just get more and more sponsors, more and more money. And yes, despite all what you say, you journalists, you will care more about the competition, despite its flaws, despite its issues, because you know that you covering the competition gets you clicks and views and engagement. It's just a fact. Every one of these um so-called newspapers and sporting agencies in Europe or sport media companies, they covered this more than any other time. They covered it more than any other time, despite all the flaws. Despite they talk about legitimate, it's not a legitimate competition, but despite all of that, they've covered it because it drives views, it drives engagement to your videos, to all because you can't compete with the streamers. Let's just be honest, okay? You can't compete with you can't compete with this new wave of media that doesn't give a shit about what you think and that's able to draw millions and millions of people. A single streamer in like some shitty room in his room is able to drive more engagement to his thoughts about the competition than you can ever do with all those 5 or 6 people you have sitting in that table or in that studio. He just can. And it's only a question of time before the money that you're getting, he gets. That sponsorship money, advertising money, they're already getting, but increasingly they're more and more likely to get that advertising dollar instead of you. And so anyway, your thoughts are kind of irrelevant, frankly. And so you will continue to say what you say, but the engagement and the dollars and the betting money now that has basically penetrated every facet of world soccer is certainly influencing African football as well. So yeah, again, I don't want to like kind of take that segue because it's again, it's just that there's all these, nobody cares. Okay, nobody cares what you think. If you're in L'Equipe or Marca or Sky News Sports, your opinions on the African Cup of Nations are to a very large extent irrelevant. Your demands are to a very large extent irrelevant. In fact, nobody knows you to a very large extent. In the African continent, you're an unknown. You're a nobody. Okay, you're a nobody, and so it's kind of funny when they come demanding Q&As. Oh, we need the CAF Appeal Board to have a question answer session to explain why they got to this decision. No, they don't. They don't care. They don't want to deal with you. They don't. They absolutely have no intention in answering anything that you have in mind. Ultimately, um, it is what it is. Okay, and you got to live with it. Now, um, here is what I say. This is gonna kind of quiet down a little bit. In a couple of hours, couple of days, the news cycle is gonna die out, and people will forget about this and forget talking about this. But in a couple of months, the cast is gonna say what it has to say about this whole thing, and it will be important because it's gonna set some sort of precedent, whether we like it or not. But here's what I think is gonna happen. I think most likely the cast is gonna actually dismiss the case, the appeal that the Senegal is gonna make. And if they were not to dismiss it, they will probably partially uphold the or potentially fully uphold the uh, the case. Now you can go to Polymarket and kind of see the probabilities of whether the cast is gonna reverse the decision or not. That's kind of what's crazy today is you can bet on anything, and therefore you can certainly bet on the decision that the Court of Arbitration of Sports is gonna make. Um, it's the crazy times we're living in, but my hunch is the CAS will uphold this decision or totally dismiss Senegal's case and appeal. The other thing is, lots of people were talking about, well, what did the Federation of Morocco win from this? The Moroccan Federation, believe it or not, there's a lot of people who seem to think that they knew that this was gonna happen. No, the Moroccan Federation. By the way, in Morocco, across nobody thought that this is gonna happen. Nobody believed that somehow the CAF was actually, particularly with what had the initial, the weak rule, like the weak fines and that were initially given to Senegal when Morocco appealed for the first time. After that decision, nobody believed the CAF will do anything about it. In fact, I tell you, like I think the Moroccan Federation, when they consulted with their lawyers said, "Well, listen, we don't care about what the CAF is doing. Okay, well, ultimately, what we're gonna do is we're preparing our case to go present it to the CAS. Okay, and we most likely have a very very good case. Okay, I'm fairly certain that the Moroccan Federation was preparing from literally the second day, the day after the competition. They went on, they tried to reach out to the best sports lawyers there are in the world, and they said, listen, we want to take this case to the CAS, because I'm fairly certain they didn't believe in the CAF to be able to kind of take a very firm sort of actions here. um then this comes out, and everybody in Morocco is clearly surprised. I'm sure the federation is surprised, but the federation, again, some people say, oh, well, how the federation has pushed too much, and now it's painting African football in a bad way. The Moroccan federation doesn't really care about the CAF, what happens to the CAF, or how CAF is painted or perceived. You need to understand that the CAF and Morocco, they don't have this synergetic relationship that so many people think. They're in fact adversaries. You have to realize this. Almost every confederation, every federation in Africa is to a very large extent an adversary of CAF. The more CAF gets powerful, the weaker the federations get. And so there's never been some sort of like tango between these two. It's always been an adversarial, friction heavy relationship. And so the CAF looking like it's weak. Maybe the CAF needing some sort of investigation by FIFA. All of these things, if they were to happen, they only benefit Morocco. They don't hurt, because Morocco, for many many years, in fact for many decades, have been saying the CAF is a corrupt, incompetent organization. And so any weakening of the Confederation of African Football benefits the Moroccan Federation. The other thing is, I think the Moroccan Federation truly wants the Senegalese Federation to also pay a certain price for what happened. They only want to damage at least maybe financially, inflict some sort of financial damage. Because of course, if you don't get the title, there's some money that you won't receive, potentially certain contracts that are no longer valid. So I think they do want to inflict some damage, and ultimately, I think, the biggest winner out of all of this, frankly, and it is probably the Moroccan Federation. It's not by the way, this is not about the team, about the players, about the Moroccans celebrating something that they haven't won on the field. All of these things are irrelevant. Okay, you have to realize that this is purely a legal battle between the Moroccan Federation, the Senegalese Federation, the CAF. It's all legal battles. And so far, it seems that the Moroccans are currently winning. And I expect them to, keep that win. Um, we don't live in a world of butterflies. Okay, this is reality, and uh, football is much much bigger than what happens on the pitch. What happens on the pitch is just the accessory. I think this is what's important. The lesson here is really this: what happens on a football pitch or ground, to answer our friend there, is only like 10% or 5% of football. It's really kind of like it's the tip of the iceberg. Okay, the things that we see, oh, it's beautiful, but the actual football, the actual realities, structure, foundations, it's all things that happen. It's all what happens outside. It's all the sponsorships, it's the betting, it's the politics, it's the confederations and the federations, it's FIFA. That's the world and the business of football. Um, and that's the reality of it. People can scream and say, what is this? And it's unfair and blah, blah, blah. But again, football in the past 40, 50, 60 years, it's no longer about what happens on the pitch. What happens on the pitch is just kind of a facade of something much bigger and much more, increasingly more significant, more money driven, more politics driven. And that is the world we live in. And as Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, tends to say, we take on the world as it is and not as we wish it to be. On this note, I'll see you guys in the next one. If you have any thoughts about what I just said, leave them in the comment section down below. And there's more to this story for sure. In the next few months, we'll probably hear back some more from the Court of Arbitration of Sport about what's going to happen with the Morocco-Senegal AFCON final. Until the next one, see you soon. And don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel.